Thanks, Marco, for the introduction. Thanks to the organization for the invitation to present our work here. So, dementia prevention, time to act. You can read this two ways. You can read this as a statement, or you can read this as a question. And I'm not sure where you are, at which front. I hope to convince you to put an exclamation mark at the end of this plenary session. Maybe Tia already convinced you to put it there. Otherwise, I will try my best. Yes, I agree totally with Marco that it's really amazing that we have a session on dementia prevention at international conferences like this, because a couple of years ago, say 10, 20 years, this was hardly been imaginable. We were not really interested. The field was thrived by biomedical discoveries of the amyloid cascade, and we were really into it. In 2009, the NIH issued a report, which was 1 year later put into a scientific publication, where they summarized the current state of the evidence on risk factors and dementia prevention. And they had a quite thorough picture to put forward, saying that yes, there are a couple of putative risk factors for dementia, but the quality of the evidence is so low that we cannot give any public recommendations whatsoever. And they did a very thorough job, really, and scrutinized the literature to a high degree. But their recommendation and their conclusion was based on a rather black or white view of the literature, in which, based on the evidence-based pyramid of scientific evidence, they said everything that's not a randomized controlled trial does not really give good evidence to the field. And a couple of researchers and other people thought this might be a little bit black or white thinking, because if you have thousands of observational studies pointing to the same direction, which we don't have, but we have a couple of hundred maybe for some risk factors, and they all show consistent results, and they show that there's a temporal association. They show that it's not only a risk factor for dementia, but also mainly for strokes, and so on. If there's a biological plausible mechanism underlying these risk factors, you might weigh their evidence differently. However, if you want this kind of causal evidence, Friedland and Nandi proposed in a paper from 2013 as a direct reaction to this NIH report, then what you want to do is have a very large group of people, randomize them into one group that is not exposed to a risk factor, and induce risk factors in the other group. So induce a depression, force people to smoke, increase their blood pressure, and so on. Now, the problem with this is that at least Alzheimer Netherlands will never fund such a study. And of course, the main reason is that it would be totally unethical to do such a study. Nobody would like to do it. So they concluded, if you really want this kind of evidence before we can give any recommendations, that it will never be there. And a couple of important stakeholders and organizations echoed this statement, this sentiment in the years to come. And we now have, I think, quite good consensus in the field that there is good evidence for dementia risk reduction, and that it's plausible. I think hallmarks include like the WHO, who stood up and said we have to increase our our efforts in this field. The G8 countries who called upon all sectors to put more money and also effort into dementia prevention, care and treatment. Of course, the finger trial we already were told everything about, added the first hard evidence that dementia prevention can be effective, and the Lancet report. And I guess what the finger trial, what some people say is, yes, but these were very subtle effects, 0.4 standard deviations difference. But actually, and I'm wrong, I'm happy that I did my calculations good, because you showed the same figures. It was a 25% improvement compared to placebo. Now, if you could put this into a drug, it would be filed for FDA immediately, I guess. And important about the Lancet report is not just that it showed that 35% of cases might be attributable to modifiable risk factors, compared to 7% from the ApoE epsilon risk allele, is that 58% of the risk we still don't understand. It's not explained by these factors. And this might include additional risk factors not included in the report. This might include gene-environment interactions. So there's also much work to do, and that's always stressed in this field. Now, we think we should start thinking how to convey the message to the general public in a better way. And one thing is, how do you want to give people insight into their modifiable risk fraction or their dementia risk? And this we have been asked in a European project called InMind in 2013. Can you derive a score that gives people insight where they can improve on? And we called this the Libra risk score. It's based on meta-analysis, on a literature review. So we updated the NIH report from 2009. And we asked a group of dementia experts, what do you think are the most important risk factors a person, him or herself, or a general practitioner could manage? And we came up with a list of 12 modifiable risk factors you can see here in the chart. And it shows their relative contribution to the total modifiable fraction. And it includes the usual suspects, you can say, like cardiovascular risk factors, physical activity, a couple of chronic diseases that should be managed well, and staying cognitively active during your life. So this is a summary score on a kind of 18-point scale, and we can by this show, okay, what is the room for improvement that you have by obtaining a healthy lifestyle? We then went on to validate this score, so see whether it really predicts dementia, because it's based on the literature and not on a single cohort. And we did this now in 6 prospective cohort studies from around the world. And here's one example, the English longitudinal study of aging, showing across tertiles of this Libra score a nice dose-response relation with increasing dementia risk. We also had some studies now in a more clinical population of people with subjective cognitive impairment, or MCI, where it also seems to work well. We also looked at the biological mechanism that might drive the association between Libra and cognition. So this was a population-based study in Maastricht called the Maastricht study, where we had imaging data from 1,800 people aged 40 to 75 years, which we think is the at-risk range, age range, where you should intervene and advise people. So we looked at whether Libra was associated with structural brain changes, and it predicted differences in total brain volume, in general atrophy, and also in white matter lesion volumes in the brain. And then, in turn, these lifestyle-related brain changes predicted differences in cognitive functions of memory, executive functions, and processing speed. And when we went on and think, okay, it's nice that we now know and that the field becomes more convinced that lifestyle-related prevention might work, but what does the general public know about this? So we conducted a survey in the south of the Netherlands, in the region of Maastricht, and surrounding municipalities, asking some 600 people, 40 to 75 years again, randomly, do you think that there's something you can do about your dementia risk? And 56% of people said, I don't think that I can change my dementia risk, or at least I don't know. And we think this is a group of people that we could reach out and provide more information about this association. Now, 70% of the participants said, I would like to receive more information about the link between lifestyle and my brain health. And when we ask people, why don't you already engage in more healthy behavior to reduce your dementia risk, they didn't say what we thought. I don't have the time, I'm not motivated, or it costs a lot of money, but they said it's simply because I didn't know. So 46% of people said this is the main barrier to me. This is why we designed a feasibility study where we wanted to know what might be the ingredients of how to inform the general public. And so we did this in the region of Limburg, so the south of the Netherlands again, as a field study. We designed a campaign which had as its slogan, "We are the medicine ourselves." So it's also in us, but also we as a society are the medicine. So it lasted for 10 months. In order to reach our target group, 40 to 75 years, we did not so much stress dementia and the risk for dementia, but we had a more positive framing. So we spoke about brain health and room for improvement, because for many people we realized it's a far from their bad show at this age range. We tried to give them tailored advice based on their risk profile, their Libra score. We engaged the local community, so we had 3 living labs in this region where we tried to have more localized public events. And so in total there were 50 public events that we organized in this 10 months. We joined forces with local stakeholders, with municipalities, with gyms, with health professionals, with recreational services, with supermarkets, to spread the message by displaying posters or campaign material, or by organizing an event, or by just spreading the word through their social media channels. So it was a very low budget project, and we really had to rely on the forces of the community for this. We also developed an app in order to give people something at hand they can work with, and not just the messages displayed. So in this app called the My Brain Coach app, what we did was people could fill in a short questionnaire, and then they would see which Libra factors do I have and which don't. So for this person here, things like weight, smoking, physical activity, and diabetes, this person is doing well. But coronary heart disease, mood, and diet is something this person could work on. And then he or she could decide which topic to choose, and for 2 weeks he or she would work on this topic. So for example, diet. And then this person would be given a daily notification in the form of a nut, a walnut, because it resembles the brain a little bit. And you could click on it and make a crackling sound, and it sprang open and something popped out of it. This could be a tip. It could be a fact about the relation between diet and brain health. It could be a challenge, like try to eat fish 2 times this week instead of meat. And this person then would collect these nuts, and he or she could get some extra points by accepting the challenge or by asking a quiz question about diet and brain in a correct way. So this was really just to give people something at hand and give them a daily nudge to think about these associations. Now, what did we find? We did not find that in the general population awareness increased. So we had a pre and post survey, and there was no change in the general awareness at the population level. What we saw was that people who heard about the campaign, they were now more aware of the fact that you can reduce your dementia risk. So we saw a decline in people answering, I can do nothing about this risk. And also we saw an increase in the 3 main pillars of our campaign, that is, stay mentally active, stay physically active, and eat a healthy diet. We saw the same pattern in people who heard about the app. Whether or not they used it, we didn't ask, but when they heard about the app, they were also more aware of this association. And what I think is really interesting is that we also asked people, did you hear about the possibility to reduce your risk in any way in the past year? And 54% of people heard about this by news, by social media, via friends, I don't know, by which channels. And these people also became more aware. So this is showing that not just our campaign was conveying this message, but people are already exposed to this in their daily life. So the question might not be so much whether we should do whether we should inform the public about this, but how we should inform the public and which messages to convey and how to deal with also the insecurities about causality and so on that are still existent. But if this was a pill that would say, if everybody took me, the number of people living with dementia would be reduced by 35%. Would you recommend it? Now, you have to know that you have to take it from 40 years onwards every day. Would you recommend it? Would you take it yourself? Of course, you would like to know the side effects. So what are the acute side effects? You might feel tired at times. You might have muscle pain. You might start sweating at times. But it's not life-threatening. Just sit on the couch, wait a minute, and it goes over. What are the long-term side effects? You might notice that your mental well-being is increasing, that you feel more vital. You might feel that fat tissue is burned and turned into muscle tissue. Well, that's a nice thing. You would recognize that you might get more friends. It's a magic drug somehow. It works best if taken in company with others. And other effects, even if we can't say for sure that it will help you for lowering your dementia risk, it might be good for your lowering your cardiovascular risk, your stroke risk, for diabetes, and for certain forms of cancer. Would you recommend it? Such a pill doesn't exist, and probably such a pill will never. But this is, of course, what you can say about a healthy lifestyle. And this somehow, I think, echoes the guidelines from the WHO that Tia also referred to. When you balance the harms and the benefits of the healthy lifestyle, and the harms are that we don't know for sure about causality for some of these risk factors, 100%. There's still the benefits that say we should recommend and tell the public about this. So, time to act or not? I think there is consistent evidence, at least from observational studies and now also from the finger trials, that modifiable risk factors reduce dementia risk. People are already receiving this message, so the question is, should we give the right information to the people? And how to do it? Should we not do this? And of course, there are more trials needed, and it's great to see the worldwide finger movement spreading over the world, giving more scientific justification about such actions. But at the same time, we need to start thinking how to inform people about this and how to frame these public health messages to people. How do we include the uncertainties that we still have when we look at the scientific evidence in these messages? So how we should be clear about what people can expect from taking up a healthy lifestyle. These messages should be positively framed because, as I said, people aged 40 years, they might not think about going to a lecture about dementia risk reduction, but they might be interested in how to keep their brain fit and how to stay independent and productive at work, for instance. So it has to be tailored towards their needs and wishes. We also saw that we have to maximize the coverage of these public health messages. We had a low-budget campaign, but we saw that those people who heard about it, they had a higher level of awareness. So we need to maximize the outreach. As Tia also said, these things have to be aligned, these implementation activities have to be aligned with existing health services. We must not reinvent the wheel and say, now we need a module at the general practitioners about dementia prevention. This can be very nicely integrated in existing cardiovascular risk management programs. And we have to think about how can we reach out to the more vulnerable groups, the hard to reach, people with low socioeconomic status, people from minority backgrounds that because we know that these preventive measures are taken up by the more affluent people, and by this we might increase the health inequalities in the population. So how do we reach out to these people? And of course, we must not blame the victim in saying, oh, you have dementia because you led an unhealthy lifestyle. Of course, this is a totally oversimplification of this message, because there are wider forces influencing how you work. The availability of green spaces, to name just one, or policies about smoking bans and sugar taxes and so on. So it's an integrated action. So we are the medicine, and we have to think about this together. And so thanks for listening, and